All right, it's action time, salespreneurs. I got James. Is it Hanzimanolis? Am I saying it right?
You're close. It's Hanzimanolis. Very
Okay.
close.
Okay. Is that Italian?
Greek. Super Greek.
Super cool, man. Uh, well, I'm hyped to have you on here. You initially caught my interest from LinkedIn. Obviously, like posting all about a lot of the outbound stuff you have. I've been super interested in the fractional SDR outbound or essentially like fractional SDR work that's been going on. Um, and so you've done that. You've also connected with a lot of sales leaders through some of the content you're doing, which I find interesting. But before I share too much, you want to tell us a little bit more about who James is?
For sure. So, James, I've always been like a super hardcore cold caller type of guy, outbound guy, do whatever it possibly takes to book a meeting. And after my last gig, I decided to go solo. I went solo for a few months. I started this small agency called Outbounder. It was great. And I recently switched to something else called Erudite, which you may have seen.
Mm-hmm.
That is this inbound led outbound agency. And so that's a totally different thing. My view on outbound is totally different. I wrote a book on it. That book to now, even that totally different view on the way our space works. So I have a lot of thoughts about this, and like a lot of them irritate people, but I try to be as vocal as I can.
Yeah. No, I definitely think there's a shift going on. We've talked about it a little bit with other people on here. But I guess I'm curious just to go back to that time where you were transitioning out of your W-2 to when you first went solo. Curious kind of like what was going on for you at that time, and maybe just to know what gave you the confidence to make that jump.
Like, to be real with you, the biggest thing is there's so many problems with W-2 like payments and commission alone. You can't make the amount of money you want by working for someone else unless you're a C-level exec or a VP getting some serious comp plan. I don't hear about people making 500,000 with a W-2. That was like the only push it took for me. We were talking about this before the show started. I moved from Idaho to Irvine. Idaho, dude, was so cheap. Everything out there was cheap. Rent was cheap. Food was cheap. Activities were cheap. Irvine, if you don't have money in your pocket all the time, you're SOL. And so that by itself, too, is a big push. I don't want to keep hopping from job to job and getting paid an average salary.
Yeah. Well, and obviously I think that comp structures are designed for you to only make a certain amount, right? Because like that's the company's job is, especially once it gets to a certain size, like their whole role is to be cash efficient. And so it doesn't make sense to make these comp plans where people can make 500,000 and like the folks that do, it's typically like a lower percentage than the average. But yeah, so okay, it sounds like you thought you could make more, decided to go solo. Like what gave you the idea with Outbounder? Because I've seen a lot of different concepts of people just doing solo SDR work where they're, booking meetings for people, which I think is really cool because, we've had people on where they went from making 30K a year to 30K a month.
Mhm.
And so like, what was that
Yeah.
like for you? Like, how did you find your first customer? How did you pitch them on the idea and stuff?
You know, this is going to be a corny answer, but this is why it's so important to build your brand. When you build your brand, people just come to you naturally. And when I announced that I was switching from, working a W-2 job to starting my own thing, I had people in my inbox immediately. It was literally that easy. That's the easiest part of it. And somebody asked me the other day too, like, what was the hardest part about competing with other people when you had Outbounder? And I never felt like I was really competing with anyone for the first time. You're either there or you're not. 95% of the people who have agencies are just like not there, dude. They're not present. They're not online. They don't have inbounds coming in. You never hear their names come up. The people whose names came up in calls I had were people I knew. It was Kellen Casebeer and Justin Chi. It was Joey Gilkey at Apex Revenue. And those people I like so much, I send them leads that aren't a good fit for us anyway. They're literally like the top 5%. Those are the only ones that come up in calls. It
Mm.
was just an easy switch.
And so you just post about it on LinkedIn. What's an ideal fit for you? And as far as like people that you were trying to do sourcing for?
I mean, it's pretty simple. It's, with Outbounders specifically, it was like I was trying to find people who had a product that was worth selling. that was easy. That was the first thing. The second thing is I wanted to find companies that had a product that was expensive enough. If you're looking to start an agency, the worst thing you could do is find a company who's got a cheap product or a crummy product. If you work with a company that has one of two of those things or both, what ends up happening is it gets stingy about commission because they'll disqualify more. It'll be harder to book meetings. It just doesn't make sense. So stay away from things like MSPs as far away as you can. Stay
MSPs.
away from any. I forget what it's called. It's basically like an IT service provider. So there'll be like
Oh,
an
yeah.
outsourced IT service. There's so many of them, and they're just cheap with money for the most part. Some of them are great. Some of them are super cheap. So I like to stay away from most of them. Anything that's oversaturated and cheap, just stay away from it. I think that answers your question, unless I got sidetracked there.
Yeah, no, well, I guess, is it mostly like tech companies that you're trying to book meetings for?
Oh yeah,
Like who you,
always.
okay, tech companies.
Yeah, service companies are hard. They're really
Okay.
hard to work for.
Um, and then what kind of tech stack are you setting up? Were you just cold calling and then you'd book through like their HubSpot or?
Yeah, I mean, it was so. My preference has always been phone burner. I checked out Orem stuff. I think Orem might actually have a bit of a cutting edge compared to some of the other softwares out there. That's my new preference. I have some other things too I like a lot. I really, really like ZoomInfo. I really like Clay. And then I put out a list of custom JavaScript formulas that you can use inside of Clay or inside of Google Sheets or inside of Airtable that do a lot of the stuff that Clay already does. So you can save money. You don't have to ask Clay to do it for you. But other than that, you don't need a super crazy tech stack.
And so you just pull a list off Zoom Info, cold call it, and then you'd book it with their AEs. Was it like were there specific companies that you found success with, or I'm curious just to hear like the success stories behind that. Like people started inbounding you from LinkedIn saying, "Hey, I'm going to do outbound for you. Just shoot me a DM." Like how did you, or I guess yeah, like what were some of the early results that you had for them, and how did you configure like pricing and packaging in there?
Pricing was always the same for everybody. I was charging $500 a meeting.
Okay.
The people that hit me up, we had a refund policy too, where if we didn't book a meeting for you after a certain period of time, we'd refund you the money back. So it was like you're paying per meeting, but you're doing it up front. That was the thing. And to be honest with you, we'll probably get into this too. There's a million reasons I switched away from that business. That is one of them. It was too all over the place and people were missing meetings, like not the prospects, but even like the companies that I was doing this for, their AEs were missing meetings. And go to market right now, Outbound is so broken. It's broken across the board. There are a couple companies doing a really good job with it. Like if you look at ZoomInfo, their reps are doing great. If you look at Rippling, their reps are doing great. I can't say that for most companies, especially the small ones.
Yeah, I think it's hard because like there's so much info out there and people are able to self-educate that it's really hard to take an outbound meeting because I can go on YouTube and spend 10 hours educating myself on a product before I buy it. And that's like what we do at our house, right? Like my wife and I, when we're considering
Yep.
buying something, we'll go watch YouTube, we'll look at the reviews and everything. And so to take that process and then flip it on its head and say, hey, like I'm just going to take a cold call from this person, I feel like is a little counterintuitive, but
Yeah, it is counterintuitive. Hey, you may have heard me tell this story before. About a year ago, just for the fun of it, I decided to cold call Seth Godin, which, for the people who don't know who that is listening to this, it's the Jordan Belfort of marketing.
Seth Godin's the
um,
goat.
he is the GOAT. Yeah, he's the best. And I read his books, man. I listened to his podcast and read all of his newsletters. I learned so much from this guy. And when I found his number on the web, I was like, there's no way this is his phone number. I give him a call. Literally, after one ring, he picks up. I won't try to impersonate him. He says, hello. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think you were going to pick up. And he's so confused. He's like, what? Who is this? And I'm like, dude, I didn't think you were going to pick up. I'm a fan. I'm calling you. I'm cold calling you. I don't even know why I'm cold calling you. And he's like, all right, just, I could tell that you're probably like a fan or something. Just chill out and tell me what it is that you want. I'll give you a few minutes to ask me any question you want. I'll answer it. And then I got to get off the phone because I'm about to head to my house. And I was like, how do I level up my career? What do I do next? I'm a cold caller. I'm hardcore at this. I'm the best at it. I haven't met anybody who's better than me at this. And he told me to quit my job. He was like, you need to find a business where the prospects chase after you instead of you chasing after the prospects. He said cold calling worked great in the 90s. 2024, not so much. So that for me was like a switch. And I was like, ugh. It's like, this is interesting. I never thought about it like this before. And I tried finding a bunch of ways to generate inbound leads. So I started posting more on LinkedIn, putting out YouTube content, putting out content on X. And all of a sudden, the amount of outbound I had to do was like cut down into half and then a quarter because the amount of inbounds I was getting was way higher. I was waking up to inbounds.
But that's for your personal business, right? So to get people to
No, that was for the past company I worked at, and for my and for Outbounder, and now for Erudite.
okay, with Outbounder, how long did it take for you to scale that up? I'm just curious because I feel
Literally,
like,
like it was so quick, and I
and you did it all on
I
your
don't think
own.
this is
Like you didn't, or did
I
you hire people to do
yeah
any SDR work?
no no, it was all me. You know, the thing that's hard about agency stuff too is it. I was doing $500 per meeting paid up front, and it sounds like a lot of money, and it was, but it wasn't a scalable model. So the best I could have probably done was hire a VA, and I don't have the time or patience to sit there and teach people how to pull lists. So that was all me. I don't think that's the story people want to hear. Like, oh, I did it all by myself. It gets so easy though when you have a brand and people could just come to you. That's not an ego thing. That's like it. That's just how it is. If you have a brand, people will come to you.
What caused you to go to Erudite then? And like, why not just do a rebrand? Because like I know you get a lot of pushback on this online, but it's like you're doing really well with fractional SDR work. It's obviously really, I think, the way of the future. We had Scott Leese on here, and that's what he talked about. He's like, yeah, fractional SDR work, way of the future, way cheaper, way more efficient. Everyone should be doing it, and it's not that hard, which I think is really cool, right? Because you can just go post on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I'm doing outbound SDR work, and you can probably get hit up. Like, it's just a hot keyword right now. And so, anyway, you're doing that, and then you transition to Erudite. Why not just do a rebrand so it doesn't look like you're closing up shop and just like transition the company?
Technically, it is rebrand. The Because we're just going to move the LLC over to under Erudite's name and just do it like that. Still billing people through Outbounder, so like that. That's like, you know what I mean. But
Okay.
I think the question here is like, why switch away from Outbounder in general? And if SDR work is going to be the future, why not be here now? And the answer to that is like, I think everybody who wants to be an agency owner or wants to do fractional SDR work needs to just chill out for a second and look at the space. Connect rates across the board are getting lowered. Pickup rates lowered, reply rates lower, open rate on emails lower. Has to do with saturation, has to do with the volume of calls and emails that people are putting out because of automation. It has to do with regulations by the FCC, by AT&T, by Verizon and T-Mobile and Microsoft and Google and everybody that plays a part in communication.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things combined, they're making it harder for people like us to do our jobs. And so the SDRs who I see that are absolutely crushing it are getting like wildly creative. They're doing stuff that I was doing at Phone Burner, like sending memes
Mm-hmm.
from Photoshop of my head cut out on top of someone's head and then someone else's head cut out on top of somebody else's head. Like I have the Step Brothers cover and I'll
Yeah,
just
yeah, I
Photoshop
saw
our
that.
heads on there. Yeah, you've seen that one. And it's like you have to do creative stuff like that to stand out. I promise you, even with that, sending stuff like that doesn't even get the attention of your prospects anymore because they get so many emails to the point where they're not even opening this stuff up. So does it work? Like obviously it works. You can sit behind your dialer, you can send emails, book a bunch of meetings that way. The hard part is like, okay, what's it going to be like in 2 years or 3 years? My feelings towards it, it's not going to work as well as it used to. And I know from experience it doesn't work as well as it used to. That's a problem. What I do see working is a version of this inbound led outbound model, right? And this is why I brought up the whole Seth Godin thing before too. He said, start going after people, or instead of going after people, let people come to you. If everybody could figure out a way to do that, we wouldn't have to sit around trying to force people into meetings they don't want to show up to.
Okay, so but then I'm also curious there, like, or inbound led, outbound. How do you do that from an agency standpoint? Like, how do you develop a plan for this business to start attracting its own inbound? Because then you're trying to mess with its marketing, right? You're trying to interfere with what their marketing team is already doing. So you'd have to either have like a very specific customer that doesn't have marketing or demand gen and somehow integrate yourself with that. Am I right? Or
No,
what's
you're
like, how do
spot
you do
on.
that?
Yeah. Well, that's actually been the biggest problem. It's like finding companies who don't have an established marketing team. And some people don't want to switch away from what they're doing. Take a look at what most marketers are doing, and a lot of what they're doing is complete garbage. They're posting stuff on company pages that nobody reads. That's what most of these people are doing, right? I think Josh Roth from Pipefy said those are arts and crafts marketers.
Mm-hmm.
People who sit around and make stuff like that all day. The stuff that you're doing, like, you're doing a podcast right now. The stuff that we see some of the performance marketers doing, like put targeted ads out towards specific personas on LinkedIn, that's something really great. Inbound led outbound is really like, it's this mix of marketing and sales. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
here's what I do. Here, go ahead.
Well, I
Sorry,
was
I
just
didn't
gonna
mean
say,
to cut
yeah,
you off.
one thing that we're doing over at build.com that's been pretty successful is being able to integrate events. Then we're switching what our outbound looks like to be more inclusive of events and inclusive of engaging with them in a different way because it's a real good pattern interrupt. It's like, hey, we'll take you to this event if you take a meeting with us, and it's like, oh, like I really want to go to that event. It sounds cool. Like I want to go to a baseball game or whatever, right? And so you're able to like have this pattern interrupt, and then it actually gets their attention, which is cheaper than spending, tons of money on Google ads.
It is. What's even cheaper than that, and this is why I'm super subscribed to this. So imagine this. Imagine you get so good at putting out content that resonates with your target profile that A, you start generating a ton of inbounds while you sleep, while you're awake, while you're with your kids eating breakfast, not doing anything, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is look at the brand presence that you can make, the impact that you can make just by posting a couple times a day here and there, right? Now we're tracking people on your website. We're seeing who's visiting your website. A lot of these inbound led outbound agencies are trying to like automatically respond to these people. We don't do that. I think it's a bit silly to do that. I don't think that we should be harassing the people that are visiting our websites. However, if Mark Benioff visits your website 25 times in the span of 5 minutes, like let's go after him. That's how I feel. That's my version of inbound led outbound or whatever we want to call it. It's 85% inbound, 15% outbound.
So are you setting up ads for people then, or how are you driving this
So
inbound?
a little bit of ad stuff. Like we're planning to do some of that, targeted ads on LinkedIn, but really everything is just from organic traffic on LinkedIn, on X, whatever platform.
So are you doing like content then, like
It's a
ghostwriting?
full blown content engine. Yeah, ghostwriting, setting up podcasts,
Okay,
doing the whole bit, long form, short form.
that's I okay. I actually, yeah, that's awesome. I think that there's a huge opportunity there for people, and like I don't know that if podcasting is the strongest avenue. The reason I love podcasting is because it's the genesis of a lot of other content. Because it's really hard for people to end up in Apple or in Spotify to like find your podcast. The searchability is not that great, but if you can turn it into YouTube, or you can turn it into shorts, or you can repurpose it into LinkedIn posts or into long form Twitter posts, I think that's where a lot of the value comes from this content, especially like ghostwriting. Um, if you can figure out how to do it for people, because if you've been posting on LinkedIn for 5 years, like I'm sure you have, or even a couple of years, really consistent, you kind of know what catches people's eyeballs. You know how to connect and really network. But there's a lot of people that have never done that, and so there's this opportunity to say, hey, like I'll come in and write something for you and show you like what the playbook looks like to drive some of this. So
Exactly.
so that's kind of like what you're doing is you're kind of taking over on the content side. You're more of a content marketing agency.
For sure.
Okay. And so like what kind of success have you found with that so far?
It's way too early to tell. I'll talk about like my personal success though, which is what I've been doing for the past year. When we announced we were shutting down Outbounder and the reason behind why we were shutting it down, which was basically just I don't believe in that motion anymore of doing 200 cold calls a day and forcing your SDRs to do it and expecting some 22-year-old out of college to just crush it. It is just so unrealistic. And that's the post I made. When I made that, it really irritated a lot of people. We also generated 15 meetings overnight. And then by the next week, I think we were at 20 or 30. So this by itself, it's amazing how one post can drive more traffic for you than a full-time SDR could drive for you for a whole month. I was talking to a VP of sales, or no, of sales. I was talking to a VP of marketing at a very big company that everybody knows. And this is back when I was still cold calling all the time. And I was like, man, I booked 30 this month, 30, and I'm all proud of myself. He was like, that's nice. He's like, do you know that insert influencer's name booked 220 inbound leads for us through one tweet? And all of a sudden, it was like everything I was
Wow.
doing was kind of pointless. Yeah, I was like, okay, everything I'm doing is kind of pointless. I was like, if I know that I can go down that route, why am I not going down that route?
Yeah. So essentially, what you said is, hey, I'm tired of making cold calls. Why don't I just like run your content?
Well, I think it's a better model. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like I'm not going to lie about it. Like, obviously, cold calling is exhausting. You know what I mean? I could
Yeah.
sit be on the phone for 8 hours a day, and I, honestly, I could probably outdo 95% of the people in the room. I've always been good at it. I just, no matter how good I get at it, there's no way I'm going to do 200 meetings in a month, even if they're like one seat accounts. There's no way that I'm going to do 200 meetings in a month. If
Mhm.
I know that there's a better avenue to take, and all it takes is for me to change my skill set, it's like, of course I will. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of an example. You look at like these construction workers and they have this giant construction equipment. And all of a sudden, the work that they're able to get done is the same work that 30, 40 years ago 10 guys with pickaxes were able to get done. I don't want to be a guy with a pickaxe. You know what I mean? I want to be the guy with the big machine because that's what's going to make more money in the long run. That's what's going to be better.
Yeah. So you're doing 30 meetings a month. That means you're making like 15, 20 grand a month, give or take, just off setting meetings.
Yeah. Well, with Outbounder, so at Outbounder we hit 25 a month. In our first month, I think we hit 20 or 24 or something like that. And the next month we exceeded that a little bit. And then after that we switched businesses. We was only around for like 2 or 3 months. So whatever 25,000 is divided by $500, that's how many meetings we had to set for people. It was a lot. It was
Yeah.
a lot. I can't do the quick math.
Yeah. But that's way more than,
50. I think it's 50.
I mean, that's still
Which
like
is
way more
insane.
than what you'd be making as an SDR, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, so like if there's an SDR who's listening to this and they're like, should I go solo? If you can put up 20 meetings in a month, do it, dude. Like, do it. You're going to make more money. I There's a lot of problems with the agency model, right? Like if Scott was in the show, like, I mean, Scott knows, but maybe he didn't talk about this part. The churn rate is just unreal. Even if you're doing a great job, the churn is unreal. The workload is unreal. So even if you're doing a great job, you end up burning out because other people it's not a sustainable model for other people.
Yeah. Well, because, and a lot of times you're probably working with early stage startups where like their business is changing really
Yeah, that's true.
rapidly too, where they're like, okay, cool, we had 25 meetings, but maybe they're not good at closing it or a bunch of different things. So I feel like
Yeah.
that can make sense with some of the churn and challenges.
Yeah. Well, here's a situation that actually happened. We were working with a company, and it's a great company. It's a really, really great company, but they're based in another country, like on the other side of the country, right? And I'm calling for them. I book a couple meetings for them in one run. I call up like 100 people. I book three for them on one run. I'm, fist pounding the air. I'm stoked. And then I message her, our, lady on LinkedIn, on Slack, and I'm like, hey, we booked some. I just see the calendar link and I'll put these on. She sends it over. They have no availability from any time in the US unless it's outside of 9 to 5. And I'm like, I, now I can't book these people for you because I booked them during the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these unforeseen things that happened that inevitably will happen to you. Like we didn't even talk about this before they signed the contract. Now I owe her $4,000 because we couldn't complete the contract. So there are frustrations like that you'll come across in this business. There's so many nuances to it that it's almost hard to believe it. Out of the other agency owners I talked to, only a few of them really had a model that was scalable. So that's another problem too. The one guy I talked to, I don't know if he wants me to say his name, but I talked to one guy, he's in Canada, and he's got this awesome little agency. And the way he works, he basically works for free, but he has this incredible rev share model where they partner with the company, and then for life, they get commission. For the first 6 months, he was eating dirt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then after that, he scaled it to like 10 people. He scaled it to 10 SDRs, and he's living off of commissions, like of, how do you call it? Like the recurring commission model. I forget what that's called. And I thought that was the most incredible thing.
So do you see yourself like trying to hire out other people, or do you kind of like running the one man show and saying, I can just take on what I'll take and that's it?
Well, for Outbound or for Erudite?
Erudite.
For Erudite, we're not going to be doing any cold calls for Erudite. It's just going to all be content, and then figuring out ways to target these people. I could do that on my own because it's not going to be like a lot. I could picture myself outsourcing to like hire some content people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not as expensive as an SDR with commission anyway, and it's not as much work. So like for these clients, I'm going to make them anywhere between 30 to 40 pieces of content per month. That's way easier than booking them 12 meetings. It just is. It's not as hard.
So you had like a bunch of people reach out to you after you posted about it. How many people are you like already starting to build content out for?
We're brand new, brand new. We're still signing deals right now. We don't even have anybody across the line yet. We have 3 people right now who are about to cross the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they cross the line, it'll be 120 pieces of content a month, right? Because between 3 people, but it's not as hard as it would be to outbound. You make podcasts, if you put a podcast into Script or not Photoshop, in Premiere Pro and just work on it, you could probably crush the whole thing into 5 different content pieces within an hour. So it's a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, and you get a lot more distribution. It's just crazy how many eyeballs you can get with a post or with all these different things, right? Because I mean, our generation, we grew up on Facebook where it's like you go post a funny meme in middle school on something and you get like 100 likes, and you don't realize though that thing that you think is super silly is actually a really powerful skill of being able to turn that attention into money, where it's like, oh yeah, like I just thought I was posting something funny, but it's actually like if you can consistently get thousands of views every day from multiple different channels, odds of those people developing a trust and being able to convert, I think, are really high for you and your brand. I mean, I know a couple of people personally who are trying to build up their online presence is through podcasts and getting active on LinkedIn so they can start selling like their consulting and stuff like that, because they realize that there's a platform there. And, you go look at your LinkedIn analytics or my LinkedIn analytics, and you just see like, oh, like there's a lot of people that are viewing it. And that's really good because it's just it's literally free advertising. Like
it is.
It's the first time ever that you could do it for free. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing because, if your target audience is following you, this is especially easy for salespeople. If your target audience is following you, it becomes so easy to sell, right? You have Bill. So I'm assuming you're selling to CEOs, CFOs, heads of finance. I'm probably missing maybe operations people, right? Am I missing anybody there, or is that the bulk of it?
Yeah, like controllers, accounting managers, stuff like that.
So imagine creating content that's suitable for that audience and having a bunch of people follow you. When they need something from Bill, guess what? They're going to go right to you because it's easier than going through the demo site anyway, right? Like waiting for a response back. That's what I do when I want something. I hit up a rep directly on LinkedIn. I don't even bother going to the demo site anymore. Plus, it gives somebody a little commission, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I feel like I'm getting sidetracked here. I forgot what the question was.
Well, no. I mean, just like on that topic of the importance of building your brand, and I think of like that trust that you're able to build with people. And for those that are listening to this right now, like less than 1% of people actually post on LinkedIn, right? And so I think it doesn't matter if something you post is junky or if people disagree with you or it makes you look like a poser. Like just embrace it, like hug the cactus and do it because um, it lets people know that who you are and what your voice is, which can do a lot of big things down the road, you know. So I'm super, yeah, but I'm like really interested in what you're going to be doing with this ghostwriting. I think that uh, people are starting to embrace it more. I mean, you've even seen what Troy Munson's doing with Demo, where he's taking one step out of the
Amazing.
like that's another example, right? Like they're literally taking one step out of the buying process because people are like, oh, like I don't want to talk to salespeople anymore. Okay, well, look, just come on a demo, watch the whole thing, ask every question you want, and then if you want to buy, just go click this link. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah. Well, this is by itself a good conversation. And this is another reason why I switched. We don't need SDRs and AEs to sell stuff anymore. Buyers are smarter. They understand how to do online research on their own. And now, thanks to things like Demo or things like um, Vendor, right? Or things like Tropic, now all of a sudden, we don't need to talk about pricing anymore. We don't need to talk to people about product features. We have it there laid out in front of us. This idea that we need an SDR and an AE and an account manager and a sales engineer and all these people to be in a call is kind of delusional. I mean, it kind of is delusional, especially like for something like, um, you know, like for the SMB stuff that comes through a bill, not to rip on your coworkers at Bill. Do we really need SDRs and AEs to handle the SMB stuff that comes in through Bill, or are we able to just let people buy on their own?
Richard
And I think
Harris
this
is
is,
already talking about that. Richard Harris mentioned that on
yeah,
his show. He said that if you're an SMB or if you're in a sales cycle that only has one decision maker, like find a way upstream as soon as possible because like the next 3 years,
yeah,
is there really a reason why somebody would need to talk to an SMB rep?
yeah. Well, let me tell you about one of the worst buying experiences I had. So this was back at Phone Burner. I was looking at different technologies, and there was one software we specifically needed for a data provider. The process was so ridiculous it hurt. Was I talked to an SDR. The SDR booked a meeting with me with the manager. I talked to the manager. Then I had a meeting with the AE. So now we're on two meetings plus a phone call. But then I met with the AE. The SDR was there. They didn't know how to answer my questions because I had questions about their API. Had to get another call with the sales engineer. The sales engineer didn't know the answer. So now we're moving to call four. And it took a month for me to get the simple answer of, hey, am I able to integrate this with Clay? Because I see the API key. I just want to know how this works. It took a month for me to learn that. And I ended up not going with the product despite the fact that it was probably a superior product. It is so much easier to just go online, review the different things that you, like the different options, and
Yeah.
pick one. It's just easier. So, and if you want to stand out, then building content is a good way to stand out.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
But
for sure.
people are buying cars without talking to anybody. You can go to CarMax and just buy a car. You
You,
don't even need to
you,
talk to a salesperson anymore.
you can buy a house without talking to people. But
Yeah, you can
yeah.
buy a house.
um, James, this has been really fun. I guess just to round us out, there's a lot of folks listening to this that are sales reps that are considering businesses that they can start. Um, if someone was to follow in your path and start something that you like what you've done, what's like the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I would say think about a business that's going to work for you in the next 3 or 4 years. And the reason I'm saying that is because when I started Outbounder, I realized how great it was in the moment and how much I just knew it was going to get harder and harder over time until it became unsustainable. And I was too far gone and I would have to just shut it down and have to start over. Find something that will always be good. And if you're an SDR and you're listening to this, before you go and start another business, I really encourage people to start stacking skills. The skills I recommend stacking: know sales. Don't know sales development. It doesn't matter. If you learn sales, then by nature, you'll know how to do cold calling, right? So understand sales development, understand sales, understand marketing, right? Like content marketing, understand Photoshop so you can start building out graphics. And I would even say like get better with communication so we can do things like this, like podcasting. That has a great return to it. Do these things and stack your skills. So generating meetings or whatever business it is that you do is so much easier.
All right, man. Play the long game. Make sure you do something you can do for a long
Play the
time.
long game.
Love it.
Yeah,
Thanks for being on, man.
for sure. This was fun. Thanks for having me on.